The paintwork of the body is of fairly good quality and endures the hardship of everyday use. Although it is worth recognizing there are still a couple of problem areas here. The edges of the doors and wheel arches are most susceptible to damage, chips. But on plastic parts, the paint does not hold so well. So, for example, paintwork on moldings and door handles begins to be washed off with water after 4 or 6 years of operation. There are also complaints about the corrosion resistance of the body, although it is worth recognizing that rotten specimens today are a rare phenomenon. The reddish coating appears most quickly in places where the paint is damaged, so it is not worth delaying the elimination of chips. Also, the inner edges of the rear arches, the lower parts of the doors, the edges of the hood and the roof require attention. Over time, they can become covered with the red spots. If even slight traces of rust appear, it is not worth tightening with the elimination of the defect, since the thickness of the metal here is not great and corrosion will gnaw through it in a few years. Another proprietary sore of this model is the corrosion of the rear window guide. Without proper body care, they can present unpleasant surprises in places where dirt accumulates, front fender pockets, engine shield, door pillar and seals. The rear arches also require attention, since there are no locker here, and the bituminous coating must be updated at least once every 5-6 years, but almost no one does this. The outer panels of the bottom of the car, as a rule, do not cause problems, since they are galvanized. But the power elements and the welding seals were not galvanized, which is why they are prone to corrosion. Rust over the years and the inside of the trunk lid, poorly painted. A lot more trouble can be delivered after emergency car, since the galvanization here is not of very high quality, and the paintwork is the main protector of the body from corrosion. There are much more problems with the external equipment of the car. So, for example, the front optics are endowed with low-quality protective plastic, which quickly becomes cloudy, reducing the quality of the light beam. The problem is complemented by insufficient tightness of the optics, which can cause condensation to accumulate in the headlights. The plastic of which the bumper and its fasteners are made is of mediocre quality. It becomes very hardy in winter and breaks even from slight contact with an obstacle. A similar problem happens with moldings, the cost of which will unpleasantly surprise you. On aged specimens, a trapeze of janitors can deliver a headache, in which hinges break over the years. Before buying a car from your hands, it will not be superfluous to check the condition of the hinges of the hood and doors. Over time, they become loose and begin to tap. In addition to extraneous sounds, broken hinges can cause the hood to open on the go, which is fraught with expensive repairs. It is difficult to call the door locks and seals successful, which gradually break and begin to let moisture into the cabin. For the Nissan Almera Classic, only a 1.6-liter gasoline power unit QG16DE was available. This unit is a representative of the Japanese school of motor building and does not cause any special problems. Of the main disadvantages of internal combustion engines, a relatively short service life of the timing chain can be noted, which in most cases stretches over a run of 140–160,000 kilometers. A signal of chain stretching will be the appearance of extraneous sounds at startup and dips during acceleration. Valves can also serve as a source of increased noise, since there are no hydraulic compensators here. Periodic gap adjustment is required. The catalyst is not very successful here either. It does not like long winter starts and can begin to crumble after 5 years of operation, which in most cases leads to fatal consequences, crumbs and drown into the cylinders. To protect yourself from significant costs, you need to change the catalyst to a new one in advance, or simply remove it. Of the less significant faults, it is worth highlighting the tendency of the throttle valve and the ESR valve to coke, which leads to unstable idling of the engine. Often require attention and the sensor DPRV, DPKV and DMRV. The throttle position sensor is considered a consumable at all, since on some instances it does not withstand even hundreds of thousands of mileage. For cars older than 10 years, startup problems are possible due to malfunctions in the software of the internal combustion engine electronic control unit. The presence in the cabin of the smell of gasoline indicates the need to replace the fuel rail clamps. If the cooling radiator fan started to work without stopping, first of all, you need to check the condition of the wiring. It is frayed. Closer to 150,000 kilometers, due to the poor quality of the metal and the lack of condensate drainage channels, the resonator needs to be replaced. It is very simple to check the condition of the resonator. You need to raise the car on a lift, and if water drips from the can, then it will have to be changed soon. It is also worth mentioning the fuel pump, which painfully endures the operation of a car with a half-empty tank. Two types of gearboxes were offered from the choice of Nissan Almera Classic buyers, a 5-speed manual 4M40 and the 4-speed automatic RE4F03A. The manual transmission has become a real disappointment for many owners of this model, as it begins to bother with breakdowns after the first 100,000 km. The main reason for the unreliability of the assembly is the manufacturer's saving on the materials from which the parts are made. Shaft bearings are considered the most problematic place in mechanics, the untimely replacement of which often leads to disastrous consequences. Things are not much better with the reliability of the synchronizers of the second and third gears and the fourth and fifth clutches. The linkage is also not reliable, the unsatisfactory condition of which leads to a decrease in the clarity of gear shifting. The clutch is able to last up to 150,000 km or more, but it has weak points: the return springs on the pedals, brakes, and the clutch master cylinder loses tightness. The automatic transmission turned out to be less capricious, and with proper maintenance, oil change every 60,000 km, does without repair for about 200,000 km, but closer to 100,000 km as a rule, it starts to kick. The main problem with the gearbox are caused by wear of the clutches and clogging of the solenoids, solenoid valve and valve body channels with wear products, followed by oil starvation, which affect the mechanical parts of the gearbox. On a run of 150 to 100,000, the gas turbine oil seals and its blocking lining need to be replaced. On long runs, resource troubles are inevitable, such as wear of the pump bushings and the rear planetary gear set. The resource of this transmission is 300,000–400,000 kilometers. The Nissan Almera Classic is endowed with the suspension typical of the budget segment: McPherson strut in front and the rear beam. It is worth noting that the anti-roll bar was not installed on a regular basis, but at the same time, mounts for it are provided, and if desired, the stabilizer can be installed independently, unless of course the previous owners did this before you. The chassis in the car is quite energy intensive and copes well with bumps on the roads, but it does not behave in the best way at high speeds. As for the reliability of the suspension, even despite the low cost of the car, most of the parts here are quite hardy. Shock absorber anthers cause the most problems, which quickly become covered with cracks, which leads to a decrease in the life of the strut. If the damaged anther is replaced in a timely manner, the shock absorbers can last up to 100,000 km. Rarely withstand more than 100,000 km and the support of the front struts. The remaining consumables of the front suspension, silent blocks, ball bearings and bearings, as a rule withstand 100–150,000 km. Silent blocks of the rear beam are essentially eternal. What cannot be said about the springs, which under regular loads do not withstand even 100,000 km of run. A rack and a pinion mechanism with a power steering is used in the steering. The steering rack turned out to be surprisingly hardy and in most cases does not cause problems for 150–100,000 km. During operation, it is imperative to monitor the rack anthers, since they are not very successful here. The power steering is also reliable, but its trouble-free service requires periodic replacement of the working fluid. If this is not done, the power steering wear products will eventually kill the pump and rack cuffs. Things are not bad with the reliability of the steering consumables. Steering tips go 90–100,000 km. Traction can last up to 200,000 km. Before buying a car, it would be useful to check the condition of the steering column, the presence of backlash in which indicates the need to replace the cardan shaft. Reliable and brakes. The only thing that displeases the owners is the short service life of original consumables and frequent failures in the ABS system, sensors, connectors, and wiring fail. In addition, most finishing materials do not resist aging well, and after 5–7 years of operation, they do not look the best. So, for example, plastic is aging very quickly, and the fabric seat upholstery actively absorbs dirt and dust. Not the best quality of the filler of the front seats, which tend to collapse, because of which the seats quickly lose their shape, especially under heavy drivers. You should not expect special acoustic comfort from a car, since there is practically no sound insulation here, and hard plastic turns the interior into a rattle over the years. Decorative panels creak, the steering column, rear shelf, doors, locks, etc. Reliability of electronics, then by and large there is nothing to break down here, since the car is devoid to complex systems and equipment. Of the problem areas, one can only single out the cabin fan, which is often changed due to whistling at low speeds. There are also such troubles as the failure of the elements of heating the parking area of the wipers. On older specimens, failures of the immobilizer antenna, control and switching units, as well as the pressure sensor of the air conditioning system for cars until 2008 are not uncommon. The trunk lead wiring can also be attributed to vulnerabilities. It breaks inside the corrugations. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.